What is it that shapes our likes and dislikes? What forms our personality and helps mold our interests? That's a question that has different answers for different people. But without fail, there is a specific time in our lives when our developing brains can be highly influenced by the things we see and hear. From our childhood into our early adolescence is prime time to shape our ideas on what we find interesting, planting a seed that will grow through the rest of our lives. Today, I'm going to take a look at what influenced me as a horror fan. What about this genre sank its hooks into me and didn't let go? First, we'll have to travel back to the early 90s. Here, the first inklings of what it means to me to be a horror fan began to form. Some of the first images to creep into my gray matter were of the underground cult classic from Tromaville Films, The Toxic Avenger. Watching the helpless nerd getting bullied, wearing a tutu, then changing into a mutated freak to get his revenge. This, along with the intestinal jump rope scene, will forever be seared into my brain. Around the same time, I can remember being traumatized by the movie Child's Play. I had a My Buddy doll, and just the idea of a toy coming to life and wreaking such havoc always stayed with me. Another movie that got me from the opening scene was The Lost Boys. From the sax solo to the aesthetic of the movie and the dope-ass take on vampires, this one really helped plant the seed of what I personally enjoy about the horror genre. From this point, my next horror influence may be the biggest of them all. Born and raised in the same state as this horror master, his movies just resonated with me. I'm talking about the one and only Stephen King. It's hard to put into words how these horror movies shape my idea of what horror is. The movies were filled with terrifying monsters, horrible apocalyptic themes, but at the same time, many of them took place in small, rural communities, which I could relate to, but also something about his storytelling made you feel like these events could really happen. The time spent on character development made you feel like these were real people. The neighbor next door, the bag boy at the local grocery store. You could envision your friends or even yourself as one of the characters Stephen King brought to life. It's funny that my favorite movie of all time is from the works of Stephen King, but probably couldn't even be labeled as horror. That movie is Stand By Me. What a great movie. That someday will probably deserve its own video. But as far as the straight up horror films, these are the ones that stuck out to me as a kid. Silver Bullet, Maximum Overdrive, Graveyard Shift, Misery, Sometimes They Come Back, Needful Things, and Thinner. From a disabled boy fighting the local werewolf to machines coming to life, giant bats killing the poor working class people of a small town to the twisted actions of a superfan, restless ghosts hell-bent on revenge to the concept of making a deal with the devil to get whatever you desire, to the horrible wasting away one man must endure. What I love about these stories is that there is always a good and evil. It shows us the duality of mankind, and if you look at the true meaning of each tale, they all have a moral to share. Most of my early horror memories came from the movies of the late 80s. Those slowly began to bleed over into the dark themes produced in the 90s. These are just some of those titles that really stuck with me. Arachnophobia. This one is still a banger. Even though spiders have never bothered me, watching this movie helped me understand the debilitating phobia some people have with these eight-legged fiends. The deadpan humor of John Goodman, the story of how the spiders ended up in the small town, and that damn pulsating egg sac in the basement still live rent-free in my mind to this day. Death Becomes Her also played a role in my journey. This one has a great cast, but to me just the idea of beauty and immortality was riveting. And with that comes the lengths people are willing to go to hold on to something that will inevitably slowly fade away. At this point in my timeline, there were two very pivotal series that came out that themselves spawned two movies each. The first of these two influential series to draw my attention was Tales from the Crypt, running from 89 to 96. The timing was perfect as I began to put away childish things and stare off at the new horizon my adolescence was heading towards. Each episode was introduced by the wisecracking, rotting corpse known as the Crypt Keeper. Fusing comedy with horror would become a major factor in the type of horror I wished to consume. This series did spawn two movies which on the surface may be considered bad, but my 10-year-old self couldn't get enough of them, those being 95's Demon Knight and 96's Bordello of Blood. The second series that had a profound influence on me was The X-Files, running from 93 to 02, with an additional season added in 2018. Mulder was dark and mysterious, and Scully was beautiful and intelligent. This one opened up the world of conspiracy theories to me, so many cool concepts from cryptids to aliens and everything in between. By the time the first note of the intro music hits, you know you're in for a twisted ride. Just like Tales from the Crypt, this one also had two films based off the series. 98's self-titled movie and 2008's I Want to Believe. Each great movies in their own right. Then it was 1996, and with it came a trifecta of influences. It all began with Drew Barrymore's blood-curdling scream. After that, the ghost face was everywhere. You'd have to have been living under a rock not to notice what Scream did to pop culture and how it changed the horror scene overnight. Then there was The Craft. Following the story of these edgy witches opened up the floodgate of my interest in the occult. Finally in 96 was the release of From Dusk Till Dawn. Yes, a vampire movie at its core, but the acting and storytelling really set it apart and made for a memorable watching experience, as it still does to this day. The latter of these movies also helped introduce me to one of my favorite filmmakers, Quentin Tarantino. 97 brought with it the complete mind destroyer known as Event Horizon. I'm rounding the corner on 40 now, and this movie still gives me the creeps. 98 introduced me to Blade. Dope movie, doper weapons and fight scenes, and oh yeah, more bloodsuckers. By this time, I was really coming into my own as a fledgling horror fan. The groundwork was there, but I still had to find my own identity as a fan, to discover what it was about horror that truly inspired me. In 1999, a big piece to that puzzle was found, corresponding with the mega release of the Blair Witch Project. This may have been my biggest influence of all. My 14-year-old brain was very impressionable, and the Blair Witch found its way in, made a nest in my cortex, and never left. The creepy story, the found footage, the zoomed-in crying and snot flying, it all seems so real.
I am so sorry for everything that has happened. Because in spite of what Mike says now, it is my fault. Because it was my project.
I can still remember the day I bought my VHS copy, and with it came a black leather necklace emboldened with the Stickman symbol. Man, I played the hell out of my VHS copy for months. Me and my friends would hang out in the local woods, and more than once we'd freak ourselves out, thinking we heard something or found a symbol hanging in the branches. Those were the days. Also at this time, I would travel to the local cinema and typically catch a new movie every week. There's just something about sharing your fear and excitement with others in a darkly lit room that makes for an excellent experience. 4 of these movies that stuck with me from 99 were The Haunting, House on Haunted Hill, End of Days, and Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow had such a major impact on me, directed by Tim Burton, starring Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci. Like any good New Englander, I had read Washington Irving's classic. With fall in the air and the smell of smoke rising through the gray atmosphere, this movie just fit perfectly. Just when I thought 99 gave me all the horror I could handle, I was sadly mistaken. A whole new world was introduced to me, and that was the world of M. Night Shyamalan. His offering that year was the iconic The Sixth Sense, with one of the best surprise endings of all time.
I see dead people.
My other favorite Shyamalan titles from this era are Signs from '02 and The Village from '04. As the new millennium dawned, 2000 had Ginger Snaps, and '01 had 13 Ghosts and Jeepers Creepers. 3 more horror gems that I still like to watch from time to time.
The Jackal.
'02 introduced me to Japanese horror with The Ring. Also Queen of the Damned, which brought to life an ancient tale of vampires, but it also mixed together the worlds of music and horror. So basically, as an early teen, all my interests tied into one. But without a doubt, the biggest movie for me from this time, which ushered in a whole new genre of horror that I instantly fell in love with, was 28 Days Later. Oh, the zombies, the end is nigh, the apocalyptic landscape, the aspects of self-reliance and survival. Zombie movies have it all. '04's Dawn of the Dead and '05's Land of the Dead just reinforced my admiration for undead dread. By this point, I knew what I liked and what I didn't. My tastes had evolved, and instead of watching something that may be hit or miss, I could zone in on what I wanted to get out of my horror experience. Rounding out my list of original influences would be '03's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Here we get all the old school badasses, the Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Dorian Gray to name a few. '03 also had Freddy vs. Jason and the start to the Underworld franchise. Lastly, The Grudge from '04 and Slither from '06 finished the framework to the foundation that had been laid over a decade earlier. Well, there you have it, one kid's journey to becoming a horror fan. This video felt necessary to make, for me to better understand my personal story with horror and how it shaped me. Hopefully for you it was worth a watch. Leave me a comment, let me know, did you find similarities with your path through the horror landscape, or was yours completely different? I'd love to hear all your different stories. Okay, horror fans, until next time, this is Planet Phobia signing off, wishing you good luck on your horror journey.